Hello, welcome back once again to Entertainment ReCast, the podcast offshoot of our YouTube channel, Entertainment ReBooted, where we like to talk about movies, good movies, bad movies, new movies, old movies, and other movie and entertainment related topics. Speaking of entertainment related topics, today we will be discussing Sony's Marvel Misadventures. And by we, I mean myself and, of course, my ever-present co-host, ladies and gentlemen, DJ. Say hi, DJ.
Hello.
All right, DJ. Sony's Marvelous Misadventures. Specifically speaking about Madam Webb, Morbius, and Mounding Missteps.
He's trying to rhyme.
They all start with M. I just have it written down here. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's all M's. Okay, so
Alliteration.
Okay, so we are talking about Sony's Marvel movies specifically. So, did you know this? Sony's superhero universe, the Marvel superhero universe that they're creating, is straight up called the Sony Spiderman universe. And it consists right now of 3 existing films. Venom 2018, Venom Let There Be Carnage 2021, and Morbius 2022. The planned releases are including Madam Webb, which will release shortly after this podcast, Craven, which may just be in post-production hell for the rest of its existence. And apparently a third Venom movie is planned.
I believe that one got a trailer already.
It was supposed to release in November.
Yeah, it got a trailer, and then that's been postponed forever. And it's there are movies that are supposed to come out real soon that don't even have trailers yet. It shows that don't have trailers yet, but this one gets one, and then gets postponed indefinitely.
Well, and here's the thing that I don't get about it is it got postponed, but it got postponed beyond a different project they already planned to release after it. So they continued to release Madam Web when they said that they were going to, but they decided to go ahead and postpone Craven to unknown timeline. But the other thing that's in pre-production limbo, so to speak, are several live-action series, including one called Silk Spider Society, and they also plan apparently a Spider-Man noir series. So let's go ahead. We have a couple of topics to talk about. Starting out, what is causing these films to fail? And I'm just going to go ahead and say it. It's called Sony Spider-Man Universe. Spider-Man is not in any of these films.
Yeah, okay. It's really odd to me because Sony and Disney made a deal that Disney could borrow Spider-Man for the MCU.
Right.
That deal is not making. They can make other Spider-Man films. They actually can. In the contract, they can make other ones. They can put Spider-Man in whatever they want.
And they do.
They made their own Spider-Man films that still happen in the MCU, but Sony made them with help from Marvel Studios. But when that deal was made, Marvel was at their height.
Yeah.
Marvel was the king of the world when it came to superhero films. They were knocking movie after movie out of the park. Even their worst of the Marvel films were pretty good. Even the floppers were pretty good. They were doing a good job. They kind of got, once they hit the end of the Infinity Saga and completed that, there was kind of fatigue because they completed the main story that started. I mean, all the way back in Iron Man, when the very first MCU film, Iron Man, Nick Fury shows up, implying a larger universe.
He shows up in the second one.
Nope, first one.
Second.
The very end of the end credit scenes, he shows up. Do you think I am Iron Man? You think you're the only superhero out there? It's right at the end of the first film.
I thought it was the second one.
No, the second one, they show up throughout the film, but the first one, Coulson shows up really early in the film. We need to talk to you. We need to brief you from your time over in the war zone.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
That's S.H.I.E.L.D. is in there very quick. and Thanos, the big bad, shows up in the first Avengers film. That gets culminated towards the end, and all of these things and stories get built together. But even the wild, like they were like, I remember, well, Guardians of the Galaxy is gonna fail. This is gonna fail. This is gonna fail. They were doing all this fun stuff. So Sony was like, "Hey, Marvel Studios, you're doing a good job over here. You want to make Spider-Man do good, and we'll just make him do good. Please make do good." And they did, and they made they brought him into the MCU and Civil War, and then gave him his own trilogy of films that are all pretty good. And Sony then said, well, let's make a continuation of the Spider Universe by making all the villains, but not have Spider-Man in it. And it's just really weird because they did Into the Spider-Verse.
Right.
Which had
Spider-Man in it.
Peter Parker.
Yeah.
And it's the tail end of him in the Ultimate Universe, but it's still him. And it's just really interesting. Like, they do this really cool thing, and it's like, why can't they do that? Spider-Man doesn't even have to be the main character. They could have done the Venom movie where Venom's the main character, but it's still him versus Spider-Man from his point of view. It's so odd to me that they have so much control, see what Marvel's doing, and they're like, let's take some of the most iconic Rogues Gallery villains from Spider-Man and try to make them the good guys without Spider-Man.
Yeah, that's really kind of...
Spider-Man makes these villains who they are. Their motivations, their character driven, everything about them revolves around Spider-Man.
Well, yeah, no, like Spider-Man, when it comes to his Rogues Gallery, is the main primary motivator. The vast majority of the villains that you're introducing don't exist without Spider-Man. Venom doesn't really work without Spider-Man because Venom literally takes control of a body of Peter Parker's main rival, Eddie Brock.
Yes. And uses his hatred of him to drive him.
Yeah, to drive him to competition. And Venom, the symbiote in and of itself, hates Spider-Man because Spider-Man rejected it.
And so the Venom symbiote sees Spider-Man as the perfect match for him. And he wants to get back with him. And he uses Eddie as a vessel for that. It's so both the Venom symbiote itself and Eddie both have a reason to hate Peter Parker.
Yeah, and to be involved with Peter Parker Spider-Man, and it also would drive Eddie Brock more convincingly. Yeah. Like that's the thing too, is like they had to change Eddie Brock fundamentally in order to make a Venom standalone film.
Not only that, but they had to create a new villain. The second Venom film, I feel, is a better Venom film than the first one. And here's why. The villain is more compelling because the villain is way worse than him. Right. Even in the Marvel comics, Carnage was always worse than Venom. Carnage is a straight up serial killer. He just kills because it's fun. It's a power trip. He's Spider-Man's Joker. Joker works with Batman because Joker is chaos. Nothing anyone is going to do is ever going to appease Joker. He doesn't want power. He doesn't want... He just enjoys the chaos. He is the epitome of someone that just likes to see the world burn. He just enjoys it.
Yeah.
But and that's Carnage. Yeah. That works against Venom as the hero there because it doesn't matter how bad Venom is, this guy's worse.
Right.
In the first film, Venom is the bad guy, technically. And so they had to make a worse... They basically just made big businessman of Venom too, and made all big evil businessman who becomes Venom is obviously a worse Venom than me. But that's not very compelling.
Yeah,
I still enjoyed the film because Tom Hardy did a really good job as a
stubborn journalist.
He did a really good job.
He's a compelling character.
Yeah, he's a compelling character, and the dynamic that he has with Venom symbiote works. The second one just does a better job because the villain's more compelling.
Right.
But the first one would have been so much better if Spider-Man was the one he was fighting.
Yeah.
Do it from his point of view. He sees Spider-Man as a problem, like whatever. It doesn't matter. You can even see him like J. Jonah as like his mentor or something. So many ways you could have gone with this, but you left Spider-Man out of it. And so Venom's major motivation is there isn't one.
Yeah.
They actually, in the film, almost as Deus Ex Machina, the freaking change. Because literally, there's no second act in that film. The first half of the film is them at odds, and then suddenly Venom just agrees with Eddie, and then suddenly they're on the same side for the end.
Yeah.
There's no coming to moment where he like has a realization and a change. He just suddenly goes, "No, Eddie, you're wrong. You're wrong. Ah, I'm with you. You're good." What? That doesn't work.
Yeah.
That's what hurt, and that's the one I like. That's not even getting into the Morbius problem.
Well, Morbius has massive problems. Like the actual character in and of himself needs Spider-Man there, because part of what made Morbius was, oh yeah, radioactive spider blood.
The whole time we were watching this movie, I'm thinking the science behind a lot of the Spider-Man films, there's a lot of junk science in it, but there's also a lot of realism to it, or theory. One of the things they did in Spider-Man comics and in the TV shows, they used a lot of scientific theory as fact.
Right.
And they would just take theories that existed and turn it into factual things that they would use as a driving motivator in the story.
Comics do that all the time.
Yes, but the problem with this film was that with Morbius, he just mixes himself with bat DNA and becomes a vampire.
Yeah.
He literally just took regular vampire bat DNA and turned himself into a supernatural creature. Not a like man bat that like has like bat attributes, into a supernatural being.
Right.
That just doesn't make any sense. Like what did he do to it?
I
and it doesn't explain it or anything.
Here's how you explain it. Are you ready yet?
Oh boy.
All right, ready? They're called vampire bats. And it's called vampire bats because the chromosomes in the DNA are vampire and bat. He just took the vampire part.
Gosh.
And he left the bat in the wastebasket.
Well, it's like he has all these vampire-esque powers. In the Morbius story against Peter Parker, what created him, it is a similar thing. He was looking for a cure. He was looking for a cure for his ailment, for his anemia, and as well as other things that he had because of it. And so he spliced bat DNA. His sample got tainted by Spider-Man accidentally. Peter Parker spoiled the sample with his own blood, and that's what turns him into a vampire. It's that irradiated mutation that affects the bat blood to make him vampire-esque. And he's also a unique vampire. Like he's not like other, because vampires exist in the Marvel universe throughout the different lores. Blade is a great example. He's half vampire. Morbius becomes a mutated bat vampire. He has some bat-like traits, some vampire-like traits, some human-like traits. It kind of just jumbles his DNA into a mess.
Right.
And he becomes a very odd, interesting mix of those things. In the Morbius film, he's just a straight vampire that got his powers from a vampire bat. And it's just silly. In a movie that's actually kind of serious, takes itself a little too seriously, but it works because it's heavy on the medical science. It's like a ticking time bomb. The movie has shown that Morbius is dying.
Mm-hmm.
The premise is really interesting. I really enjoyed the premise of the film, but it was poorly executed. And out of all of them, this was one they could have done without Spider-Man, and it could have worked. And they botched the crap out of it.
Right. But anyway, like it continues to be an issue though, like even leading into the next like films that are coming out. Madam Webb. Madam Webb. We haven't seen the film.
The trailer looks so bad.
The trailer looks awful. We haven't seen the actual film yet, but judging by the trailer and the basic synopsis that we've been given, it looks like it's going to be really bad. And I think part of that badness falls into the same category as like Morbius and Venom, is it's losing its primary motivating factor. Madam Webb, her like multi-dimensional, interdimensional being centers around Peter Parker.
Yes.
Like that's like her grounding force is the Peter Parkers. But Peter Parker doesn't yet exist. And you have characters like Ben Parker, is going to be in it, played by the actor who played Ben Wyatt in Parks and Rec. And then they have Mary Parker. And I'm a little worried that they have confused Ben Parker with James Parker.
I don't know.
Because they don't have James Parker, but they have a Mary Parker who is pregnant with supposedly Peter, and Ben Parker is involved in this somehow.
Well, I mean, it could be the brother.
Well, he is the brother.
Yeah.
Ben Parker is James's brother.
But I know what I mean. It's like he could be his uncle, not the father. Well, who
Yeah.
knows? But
it's anyway, like
my major thing with it isn't even lore. It's like I actually think the premise is really interesting. They took 3 other spider people, and all girls. So it's like an interesting, like she's like entering into this universe from what they can become later.
Right.
But these are people who will be like way older than Peter by the time he becomes Spider-Man is an odd thing.
Well,
timeline wise, it's weird, but whatever.
Timeline wise,
the dialogue.
The dialogue's awful.
I'm watching this trailer like, okay, the premise of her like seeing the future because she's connected to spider people is a very interesting take on her powers and things from the comics. But the dialogue when she speaks, it's like a robot reading from a script. She's like, my mother was that one line. My mother, he was with my mom when she was down in the rainforest doing her studies on spiders, and things happened
before she died.
Or
I'm
like,
then she died.
Dude.
Yeah, it's
like,
bad.
Do you even care your mom died? And I was actually like, maybe that won't be the finishing touch. You know what sold me that this is going to be garbage? Morbius. Because that's exactly how all the lines in Morbius were delivered.
So fun fact.
All of Morbius is delivered like everybody's reading from the script without emotions.
Fun fact, DJ. Are you ready for this? You know why it might sound similar to Morbius?
Same director?
Same writer.
Oh my gosh.
Same writing team.
Well,
not even just writer, writing team.
Well, even then, like, a writing team can write cheesy dialogue, but you can deliver it well. The direction in Morbius was horrible.
Yeah.
All of the characters, dude, there's a moment in Morbius where the freaking, this is why Sony is failing. They could have done all of these characters without Spider-Man if they had the guts to do it. They should have just made them the villains that they are, and should have just, what would these villains be like if Spider-Man wasn't there? This is actually an interesting concept. Think of a universe where all of Spider-Man's rogues galaxy showed up and Spider-Man never shows up. That's actually an interesting premise.
It's an interesting premise for a film.
But no,
not
but
a universe.
even for multiple, you do multiple villains without him, you can see some would become heroes in his place.
Yeah, but now
some would become more villainous.
But DJ, now
some would become
DJ. Now you're writing an entire universe that MCU is already doing. It's called What If.
I know.
The question literally is, what if Spider-Man didn't exist?
Yes.
And you're creating an entire movie universe on what if.
But you could do that if you do compelling characters. Tom Hardy's Venom sold it for me. Even though missing Spider-Man hurt it a bit, I still really enjoyed the films. And it was fun seeing Venom become like the quote-unquote Spider-Man of his universe, because there wasn't a Spider-Man. So there was a void to fill. Spider-Man didn't screw him out of his job. He was a failure on his own right, because Spider-Man wasn't there to blame for his failures. He had to accept responsibility himself. So him and Venom had to work things out. It's an interesting idea to see that happen. Maybe not the best score, but not too bad. Morbius's problem and what's going to kill this universe is that there's no emotion in it. And that one scene in Morbius we watched where the FBI guy walks in and sees the carnage of all these cops massacred, and he goes, "This is what it's like in my town now. He's murdering cops now. This is unacceptable. You go make sure and take care of this. I'm going to go have a donut and a coffee, and I might care about this later." That's literally, he walks in there and just like, "This is unacceptable. I cannot take this. This is so bad." Oh, that hurt. Watching him, just like, I watched that. I was like, he doesn't give a crap about these people. And that was the entire film. Everybody in that film was like the like the love interest of Morbius is like, hey, you shouldn't be doing this experiments with bats. This is unethical. You shouldn't do this. Well, you would say that, but honestly, I'm really doing it because it's the right thing to do. Well, I guess that's true. Let's go do it together on a boat. That's literally how it was done in the film.
Yeah, no, like
I'm
the film's awful.
I'm watching it like, this is so boring. Nobody wants to. It was a film. It looked like a film that nobody wanted to be on set for.
And the same thing's happening with Madam Web.
And Madam Web, the dialogue and the way it's coming off in the trailer looks and sounds exactly like Morbius.
Yeah.
Which means even if like the Morbius, watching the movie, the story was interesting. This idea of a doctor who's a kid who's like got a debilitating disease that could kill him, fights against it by sheer willpower, barely holding on to life, trying to cure this disease for him and his friend and anyone else that might be ailment from it, doing unethical things to do it, and finally coming up with a cure that ends up being as much a curse as a cure, and then his friend gets it too, and then them going two completely different directions with it is super interesting. I was trying so hard to be invested in it because that was an interesting premise, but they kept monotoning through the whole thing. And I just know that's what's going on with Madam Web. And the trailers for Craven the Hunter came across that way. I'm the most greatest hunter in the world. Our dad made us hunt and made us do things, and that's the way we did things. I don't understand who's making these films. Like, have they made a movie before?
No. Well, the thing is that I think that part of it is just they have been hiring. The direction has been awful in a lot of these films. But
yes.
The other thing is that also the acting isn't that great.
I think that Venom did well in spite of the direction and writing, because Tom Hardy's performance in the second one, what's his name? I can't remember his name. His performance.
Woody Harrelson?
Yeah, Woody Harrelson's performance as Carnage was glorious.
Well, but
and that made that movie. But a lot of like the plot itself was kind of dumb, but the villain was compelling as heck. Morbius, nothing. It was the opposite. I had a compelling story, but was poorly executed. Can we take the direction of Venom and put it to the story of Morbius? I think we might get something that's reasonable.
That's fair. But the other thing I think is that a lot of these projects are picking up people that are either not the greatest actor for the role, but they have some name credibility to them, or they're picking directors that just do not do these kind of films. When it comes to when it comes to comic book films, you kind of need to have a certain way of looking at the film itself and the way that's written, and direct it in a different way than a regular film. The problem is that a lot of Sony's projects are being handled by directors that are either completely unproven or they have never directed a superhero film. They usually do dramas. They usually do some kind of maybe even comedy, but most of them come from drama backgrounds. Part of the reason I think that Madam Web
dramas,
well,
like Morbius comes across like these are the these are the days of our lives, like days of our lives. It comes across as a soap opera, a poorly written soap opera, but the soap opera at least has emotion. Soap operas will have a massive amounts of emotion. The film has no emotion to it. Well,
so part of it, I think, is that they're hiring people that have directed for drama in TV, or they've gotten direction from drama movies, and then they lose the super powered aspect of the film, the thing that drives the motivating force of the actual movie in its entirety. But the other thing too is that they're probably not the greatest at directing with actors and overblowing emotion and stuff like that. I think that Morbius fails because they were trying to tame down Jared Leto somehow, when Jared Leto is in and of himself a pretty bland actor. He's actually, I think he's very overrated. All of his characters are the same. They may be a little bit manic. They may be a little depressed, but for the most part, they're just kind of unhinged and very bland. So Morbius really fails though, because it doesn't understand that it's a superhero film. And a lot of the superhero stuff, it's very clear that the script, the way that they wrote it, was enter CGI fight scene 1, enter CGI fight scene 2, enter CGI fight scene, enter CGI graphic.
That's actually another problem that I have with the Sony. This is a problem that Marvel got into after a while. So one of the issues that Marvel had with a lot of its characters when the MCU started was hero fights identical version of himself but made a different choice. Yeah. Iron Man, he fights Stone, which literally he fights him in an Iron Man suit, but he's the evil Iron Man. People pick on Thor a lot for being a bad Marvel film, but that's one of the most compelling for me in the MCU, because Loki is a very different character from Thor. They are not foils. They have very different. In fact, in the beginning, they're very similar. Loki is way more mature than Thor. And Thor then matures past Loki, and Loki throws a tantrum because he matured faster than him. It's like this. It's like a race between them. That made those characters interesting to me because they were different. They weren't an exact foil. They weren't an exact copy. They were different. Captain America's Red Skull. He is a superpowered him, but he's also an entirely different philosophical monster. And he doesn't fight Captain America directly. He has the super soldier serum in him too, but he doesn't just fight Captain America. He makes his minions do it for him. He focuses on his brain, not his brawn, even though he has the same strength. It's his charisma, and Captain America actually learns from him by relying on his people and helping it work out. He learns from Red Skull that he doesn't have to do it all on his own. Just because he has the power doesn't mean he has to. It's an interesting thing. MCU got away from that. The Sony movies are doing exactly what Iron Man did. Fight CGI you. That's what Marvel started to fall back into later. They did it with Black Panther. Black Panther fought another Black Panther. You know what would have been a way more compelling villain for Black Panther to fight? Claw.
Yeah.
But he was a throwaway joke in that movie. They made it just another Black Panther. Just Black Panther fights another Black Panther. It was such a good movie, and then the climax is boring. They fall into that so often, where it's just like, fight CGI version of yourself. Yeah. Captain America Winter Soldier was strong because Bucky was his friend, and now he's an enemy. There's these interesting, compelling stories they do in the MCU, and you can see what works and what doesn't. It's like Sony looked at Marvel's universe and got the wrong idea. Hey, you know what works? Let's make our villains fight a CGI version of themselves. So the first Venom movie is CGI Venom versus CGI Venom. It's not very compelling and it's boring. It's sad.
I mean, even technically the second movie does the same thing.
Yes,
technically.
But Carnage is a completely different animal.
He's a character, and there's a lot of different things that are different about him. But yes, it could fall into that trope.
I agree. Yeah. But it's not the CGI fight that bothers me. It's that they look and sound, and they end up when you have two Black Panthers fighting each other, especially it just doesn't it doesn't seem like it's a real fight. It seems manufactured. It feels lame when there's fighting when it's just two of the exact same characters fighting each other in CGI. It works a lot better if there's a dynamic between them. Carnage had that. Carnage is unique and dangerous and insane and fun versus Venom. Especially with the aspect of his girlfriend having his one weakness as her superpower. That was an interesting dynamic in that film. Morbius goes right back to it, and it goes, Morbius is vampire, fights friend who is vampire. If you're going to do this, you need to make the villain a lot more compelling. The villain, in my opinion, was actually one of the better parts of that film, because he was cool and calm and collected, but just twisted. Yeah. But everybody in the film was cool, calm, and collected, so he didn't stand out.
It's true. Like
if everybody was real people with real emotions, he would have stood out way more. Yeah. Even when they were fighting in the streets and they were panicking civilians, they panicked like this. Oh no, fight going on, minor inconvenience. We should probably get out of the way.
Oh man, this is going to be hell on traffic.
Yes! They treat it like a minor inconvenience rather than a problem. Like, it's weird. It's just an odd thing. And I'm not saying you can't do them versus themselves, but you have to give a stronger reasoning for it. It worked in Iron Man because Jebediah Stone was a compelling character.
Right, he was his own character the whole film.
It worked in Black Panther because he was a compelling villain. Right. Even though the CGI fight was a little anticlimactic, it was still interesting because the villain was strong. Sony went, hey, let's just do that, but make the characters less compelling. And it's like, okay, so you took the worst part of what Marvel does, made it the main theme, and then toned it down to make it even worse than the way they did it. Yeah. Is insanity. That is the core of what I think is killing them and is going to kill them and is going to keep them tanking for eternity, is if they keep focusing on the wrong thing. They keep focusing on what they did wrong. Ant-Man had Ant-Man versus Evil Ant-Man. Yellow Jacket. Still a way good movie because it was...
Well, they were different enough characters.
They were very different characters, but it was the heist. The focus was on the heist. The Sony movies makes it would be if they took the first Ant-Man film and made the focus of the film the battle between Ant-Man and the other guy. That wasn't the main focus. The main focus was actually the fighting between Ant-Man and the old Ant-Man.
Yeah.
That was the main compelling part of the movie. They're clashing with each other and them like becoming a team and trying to figure out their way forward. That was the compelling part of the film. The climax in battle was the stakes were so high because of everything that led up to it.
Well, it also didn't reveal him as an actual like superpowered villain until the third act.
Yes.
You never knew he was going to put on the suit unless, well, the trailers obviously, but for the most part, if you just watch the film as it is, you never think, oh yeah, he's just going to become the Yellow Jacket. No, you see the suit, you see him develop all these different things, you see him move across all these different things, and then he foils the heist, which was the main focus of the film, like you said. And now suddenly he has an actual threat he has to overcome. Not only that, it's an actual threat that has capabilities that he does not have.
Yes.
So that's where it, like, Ant-Man is a very solid put together film.
What they did with the Sony universe is they took that concept and stripped it down to it's the bare concept of that and made that the point of the film. I was like, you missed all the heart of it. You missed what made the film the film. There's never a moment, did you notice there's never a moment where Morbius like really fights with the girl about anything? She comes in and goes, you shouldn't do that. And he goes, I'm going to do it anyway. And she goes, okay.
Yeah. No, there's no interpersonal
there's no conflict. There's no interpersonal conflict. She doesn't act as a conscience. I can get her giving in, but she doesn't even try. She comes in and goes, you really, it's like he was murdering someone. She walks in like, you probably shouldn't murder that guy. And he's like, yeah, but I'm gonna. And she's like, okay, I'll help you do it. Like, that's basically what happens.
Well, none of the characters are really compelling. Like, that's the thing is like,
no,
all the characters really fall flat.
Except for the villain.
Yeah, the villain.
But he falls flat because his uniqueness in being stable when he's unstable doesn't work when everybody's that way.
He just blends into a background of beige.
Yes.
like that's kind of one of the big issues with Sony is that they make these poor decisions. It's bad direction, and it's also just it's cheap storytelling.
Yes.
And the thing is that I think that so we have we have a similar situation happening between two different studios when it comes to the failure of comic property, right? We have Sony and we have Warner Brothers. Both of them have these amazing like IP. They have these intellectual properties that are amazing and would make amazing, compelling stories. And they never do. In Sony's case, I think it's just a complete mismanagement, and the fact that they're just doing it to try to print money and it's not working. And they don't understand why it's not working because they're like, well, we made MCU trope. We did MCU trope and we've done MCU trope and we have most popular superheroes, villains, rogues galleries, and we put out the most popular.
I think they had this idea it was going to print money, and they just thought that they could put anything out and it would just make money.
Yeah, and the problem is that's not happening. And so
they thought with WB did that with Batman for years. Remember, that was the film they kept remaking over and over. They'd always make a Batman film
because it worked.
Because it worked, it made money.
Yeah,
but then they made Batman Forever, and then they made Batman and Robin, and it didn't make. The formula stopped working because they stopped making compelling stories. Batman Forever and Batman and Robin both have good elements in them, but what kills them is is superficial stuff. What killed Batman Forever is its tone was inconsistent, and what killed it couldn't tell if it wanted to be comedic or serious. Right. It was struggling between the darker Batman of the first two films and the 60s Batman. And then Batman and Robin doubled down on the let's go the 60s route, but it still had the aesthetic of the more serious film. So it just like completely fell apart.
Which is in and of itself kind of an interesting study because I think it falls on the director with that one. I don't think he was 100% familiar with Batman outside of the 1960s.
I have a controversial point. I think the failure of any movie is the fault of the director. Period.
For them, yeah, I would say
because the director is the person who does the main three things of the film. They direct the shots, scenes, filming. They direct the editing, cutting, and composition of the film, and they direct the actors. Those are the things that make the film. They run the cinematography, they run the acting, and they run they're the ones that tell the actors, the characters. They're the ones that tell the cinematographers and the sound people. They're the ones that tell the editors what the theme and how they want the film to look. The director's job is to turn. A movie is made of a million components. A script. Somebody writes a script. You have a sound crew, stage crew. You have actors. You have extras. You have all of this stuff. Studio cinematographies, all of the wardrobe, all of that. The director takes all these pieces and turns it into a movie. That's their job. Their job is to make all of this stuff into the vision. Director has different ways they can do that. They can make their own vision. They can follow the vision of the original. If it's based on a book or an IP, they can go with the vision of the original writer. They can take their own twist on it. There's lots of things you can do. But ultimately, if a film fails, I don't mean fails like a good film can fail commercially because people just don't understand it, don't know what it is, maybe it's not marketed well. There's a lot of things that can fail outside of the director. But if a film is just bad, like it's poorly constructed, that is the director's fault. The best analogy I have of this is in construction. You have a freaking general contractor. That's your director. The general contractor takes the electricians and the plumbers and the framers and the drywallers and constructs a building by telling each of those people what to do. They draft the plans. They get the layouts. They then take that to the companies and have the plans. If electrical is done wrong, you know whose fault it is? The general contractor. They have to go to the electrician and be like, electrician, you messed up. Fix this. Or if they won't, hire someone else to do it. Ultimately, the job is yours to make sure that the project is put together. Individual people will make mistakes and fail. That's normal. Your job as the general contractor is to go in and make sure to oversight these things and make sure they're done correctly, and to make sure the finishing project meets the as close to the design as possible with your own. You can have your own little things in there, or if the owner who's buying the house wants some things added, you might make some changes along the way. That's the point of a director. The director looks at these things, and they can, when you send out initial trailers or teasers, a lot of times you're trying to get feedback. How did the public react to this scene? Sonic. They put out Ugly Sonic, and they were like, oh, this is garbage. The director went to the team and said, fix it. That's the director's job. The director could have been like, screw them, I want this vision. And then the movie flops because people hate the main character. The director's job is to sift all of these different directions they're getting, put it into a film. Now, that having been said, the directors don't always have 100% control of their films. Sometimes executive producers, studios, actors get more power than they should have and get to push back. You get a really big, the studio says, we want this actor in there. And the actor says, well, I want my wife to play this part, and they won't budge on it. And the studio wants that actor. You have to give, there's going to be some of that. The director's job is to push this into a finished product. And if the film fails, it's on the director. If the director got horrible things forced upon them by the studio or other things, the director should say so. Too many directors are afraid to say that. They'll often fall on the sword. I've seen this a lot. If it is actually the director's fault, a lot of times they won't take the blame. They'll blame other people. But if it's like the studio's fault, they'll take the blame. Like, it's so weird. Like, just have the guts to go, the studio forced this on me and I could not, this was my vision and they took it from me.
Well, like that's what happened with like Fan Four Stick.
Yep.
The original director literally came out and was like, no, that's not the vision of this film. This was the vision. This is how it was written. This is what it was meant to be. And then the second director came out and was like, yes, I had to take his thing and make this thing because studio said, and they wouldn't let me reshoot.
Yep. That's exactly. That's what happened with, another great example of this exploding just like this is actually Justice League.
Right.
Where Zack Snyder had an original vision, and they fired him because the Avengers did really well. They're like, hey, we want to make an Avengers film. Not only did they copy it, but they hired the guy who made it. They hired Joss Whedon, who made the first two Avengers film, to make Justice League better. And gave him limited resources to reshoot. And so he basically just like took existing footage and kind of re-edited it into that. I watched the Snyder Cut and I watched the original, and I'd say Joss Whedon did a pretty good job of making a different vision. And that was the studio did that. That was their fault.
Yeah.
You know when it's the studio's fault? When the director leaves or gets fired. I said this before. I don't think enough directors walk off. Maybe I can't blame them though. It's like if you have a direction of a film and you're directing it one way and the studio says no, we want it like this, you have two choices. You could walk off the project and it turn into something else, or you could try to fight back as much as you can. I think some directors cross the line and they quit. Some get fired and some stick with it to the end. And you can see those pretty much any movie that has turmoil like that fails. I think the biggest failure to films in general is when the studio and the director are on the same page. Most films, even if the premise is bad, if the director's allowed to do what it is they want to do, they usually get a pretty decent film.
That's fair.
Avatar is a good example of that. James Cameron was allowed to do whatever he wanted to. The film is gorgeous. The plot's messy and kind of dumb, but it's a gorgeous film and it's fun to watch. And it has the scenes where Jake is part of the tribe is fun. Him interacting with them and becoming part of them is compelling and fun. The war part with the humans where it gets kind of dumb, but that's a compelling part of the film. He was allowed free reign of that film, and it came out pretty good. If the studio had shoved their nose in it, probably try to improve it. I think what it is a lot of directors come with a film that probably isn't going to be a huge success, but it'll do okay. And the studio's like, we want this to be better. And they try to make improvements, and it just makes it worse. because they see what other studios, they look at other successful films. Let's copy that. Let's do what they did. Let's try that over there. But it just ends up a muddled mess. So, in my opinion, the fault lies on the director, and then right after him, it's the studio. Director, then studio. Because those are the two that have the most power involved. Executive producers go in that. I conclude executive producers with studio. They may be separated, but the general, the people that are funding it and publishing it put a lot of input in a film, and a lot of times they break things. Put my daughter in your movie. Put my wife in your movie. I don't like this. We have that game we play that actually helped make this channel what it is.
Pitch Storm.
Pitch Storm.
Yeah.
Pitch Storm is literally like how like Hollywood works, like just in a game format. It's like you're trying to make a film and then you like last minute on top of people. And like I feel like a lot of times directors are just trying to do the best with it, but then you get deadlines. So it's like they keep cheating. You're 2 weeks from the deadline. You want this horror film to be a romantic comedy. And it comes out a mess. There's just so much studio gobbledygook. And I think Sony I think they're just deep in it.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that it's just a mismanagement on the fact of Sony. I think Sony is picking poor directors that are not qualified for their job.
Or if they are, they're not letting them do work.
Or they have a specific thing where they're like, yes, do this, this, and this, and this, avoid this, this, and this. And then the film comes out and they're just like, okay, it looks like crap, approved. Oh, it actually looks kind of compelling. Let's remove that.
I almost feel like Sony wants to lose money on these films.
Yeah, sometimes I think that too. Fun fact actually about Morbius. Remember the trailers for Morbius and it had all the posters that had Spider-Man, like wanted, killer, murderer. Yeah. The director, even after the film came out, straight up said that Spider-Man exists in Morbius's universe. The studio did not let him have those posters remain in the film, even though they have the rights to do that. Sony actually, if Sony wanted to, despite their contract with Disney, if they wanted to, they could make a Spider-Man film.
Yes. They could use Tom Holland and put him in a Spider-Man film with those villains if he wanted to.
Yeah. And they don't. Which makes no sense. It's a complete mismanagement of your resources. I'm sorry to say, I don't care if the MCU gets pissy that I have Spider-Man showing up in my own universe. I don't have to have it connected to the MCU. Why? Because I believe my character, my IP, the reason I keep hold of this IP, the reason that I pay money to keep the rights for this one specific character is because that specific character can stand up on its own. And I believe that that character will make me money, not my connection to Disney will make me money. And Sony has lost the vision behind their acquisition of Spider-Man specifically.
The only other thing I think of is that Marvel and them made a deal in the background that they have to do certain things, and it's controlling everything they're doing. There may be some closed backdoor deals that are affecting this. That's the only thing I can think of. Like they made some deal like you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do this, you can't do that. We get creative control. Your movies need to. I don't know. It's just weird to me. And like you see, yeah, that's a good point. Like Spider-Man, like they own Spider-Man, they can do whatever they want with him. Screw Disney. Like either make a good film or don't make them at all.
Yeah, and
I would have if you were gonna make these films, do them good. If you're not gonna do them well, why make them at all?
Well, yeah, no. If I had control of Spider-Man, I'd use him. You know why? Because I know for a fact he can sell. You know how I know for a fact he can sell? I've done it twice. In 5 separate films, I have done it. 7 films now. In 7 films, 3 separate universes, I have been able to sell Spider-Man by itself and be extremely successful. This Spider-Man universe, my live action one, is not doing well. And I wonder why. Is it because Spider-Man isn't in it, even though I say that Spider-Man is the main part of that universe?
All the animated ones do super well.
All the animated
Every
ones do
single
super well.
one, even the worst of them.
Any Spider-Man game is a best-selling Spider-Man game. Any of them are best-selling Spider-Man games. You throw Spider-Man in anything, it's almost guaranteed to be gold. Why is it that when you own the rights to this amazing character and you specifically bought this specific character, like think about it, Sony could have bought way more characters if they really wanted to when Marvel was bankrupt in the 90s. They could have bought any of the characters. They bought one, Spider-Man.
Yep.
Why? Because he was the best. He was the flagship character of Marvel. He was the most important character in Marvel. If you're in control of this character, use him well. Think about how Warner Brothers does it. Warner Brothers sucks at making a collective universe. They're not that great about making Superman films. They're not so great about making Wonder Woman films. They're awful at making Green Lantern films. But you know what they do make? Decent Batman films. And what do? Every 5, 10, 15 years, however long, they release another Batman film. And it does well. You know why? Because they know that character specifically has worth. And they give him the proper resources, and they put the right people, and they spend the proper amount of money to make sure that that project goes well. But then what do? They take Zack Snyder, who wanted to make a Batman film, and they don't give him Batman. They give him everyone else. The director of The Flash, it's very clear that the director of The Flash wanted to make a Batman film. The first half of that film has Batman in it, and every time Batman's on screen, it's a delight. Whenever Michael Keaton is on the screen, it's amazing. The rest of that film is awful because your director wanted to make a Batman film. Everybody wants to make a Batman film because he's the best character. And the thing is that Sony has the best Marvel character, and they refuse to make a film with him. All the people that get the rights to be able to do it, like Into the Spider-Verse, made amazing films.
Yes.
Sam Raimi, his Spider-Man trilogy is great. Yes, the third one's not so great, but it was a great series to begin with. And then The Amazing Spider-Man.
The
Amazing
problem
Spider-Man
with
2,
that one is it's a little cheesy, and
Yeah.
the third one gets really cheesy. But they're not bad films; they're just cheesy, which is fine.
Yeah.
I liked the two done with Andrew
Garfield.
Yeah, I liked those two. Like, those were a little more serious. I think they were just too Spider-Man serious was a little too much for everybody, because that one had some of the problems that some of the other Sony films are having now. A little too monotone, a little too not enough like variance of emotion kind of hurt that one a little bit. But that scene where Gwen Stacy dies is compelling as hell.
Yeah. No, it's like...
And it's a shot-for-shot remake of the comic it's based on.
Yeah.
They literally took it straight from the comics and put it right onto the scene. And it's intense and devastating and really well done.
So here's another thing too. Like, think about it. Like, they do really well with Amazing Spider-Man 2. Has some amazing shots. It's memorable. The longer that film is away, like the longer that film has been out, the more people come to appreciate it. There are people that literally will take clips from The Amazing Spider-Man 2 and be like, why the heck is The Amazing Spider-Man 2 so beautiful? Some of the shots are beautiful in that film.
What made that one a little messy is they tried to they shoved too many villains into it.
They shoved too many villains into it, but the other thing is, I think that people took for granted Spider-Man films. We just were like, oh, this isn't a really great Spider-Man film. Marvel's coming out with some great stuff. Maybe if they get a hold of him, he'll do better. And then Sony was like, yeah, maybe if MCU gets it, they'll do it better. But if I was Marvel, or if I was Sony, I would have watched No Way Home, okay? And I would have taken notes. What was the crowd's reaction when Andrew Garfield showed up on screen?
Mostly they were excited.
They were excited. Standing ovations, shouts, screams. Everybody was super excited about it. When it was rumored he might be in it. Shouts, screams, excitement. When the posters for Morbius showed a Spider-Man, people were super excited. And they were like, oh my gosh, Andrew Garfield might be in this film. Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man would sell. Even if you put him in 3 scenes. That's all you needed. To fix Morbius, bring up hype excitement, throw Spider-Man in there for 5 minutes. Throw Peter Parker in there for 5 minutes. Make him interesting. Like, throw a thing in there where it's literally somebody's talking about how Spider-Man disappeared.
I can get behind that, but Morbius' problem was it was just
well,
so
Morbius
monotone,
is,
it wouldn't
that's
matter.
not the best.
You could have that's a bad example. Venom, it would have really gone from it.
But any film. Like, even if you literally just said Andrew Garfield has been cast, he is involved in Madam Web. When that awful trailer came out, I probably still would have been like, I'm curious to see how Andrew Garfield fits into this.
Yeah.
You know, like, that's the thing. And it's just like, you have a Spider-Man who people like. Even though his second film is considered a bad film, people still liked Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man. He's a little older now, but you kind of, I'm sorry to say, but MCU handed you the perfect tie-in to this universe on a silver platter by saying, I stopped pulling my punches.
That was a really good line.
You now have not just Andrew Garfield, who we know as, you know, nerdy, peppy, happy, optimistic, kind of comic booky, but you have him to the point where he could be a really dark character, and this universe is so messed up just because of the fact that maybe he went into hiding because he stopped pulling his punches. He did something he regrets, and the public and J. Jonah Jameson has a real reason not to like him. And people are looking at JJJ and being like, he had a point. He beat that man to death.
Yeah.
You know, like, you were given something on a silver platter and you still managed to squander it. That is what's so frustrating about Sony's universe. And I think it could just be fixed by simply throwing Spider-Man into a film for 15 minutes. You don't even pay him for a whole week of filming. You just throw him in, have him talk a little bit of dialogue, and then you have him CGI swing away somewhere. You have Spider-Man somewhere in the background doing something. It's on a news report. And then eventually you lead up to the point where, yes, eventually you're going to need to put Spider-Man in. But here's the fun part about this whole thing, too, with your whole multiverse theory and everything that's going on. When you reveal Spider-Man, it could be a completely different person.
Yes.
And now people are like, what the heck?
Yeah, that would be fun.
Yeah.
An entirely different one from any of the ones we've seen so far. Just a whole new one.
Yeah, and it just looks like Andrew Garfield's.
That actually points to, and this is my final point to all this, but just to close out here for me, that actually points to the whole thing of, like, studios and directors like to treat audiences like they're stupid.
Yeah.
But then also they'll randomly treat us like we're geniuses. It's like they're constantly caught between the audience is too stupid to understand what I'm saying. I need to shove this down their throat. And they'll easily get this concept. And what those things are wildly all over the place. Yeah. They'll be like multiversal, universal, string theory. Let's not explain that. They'll get that. I mean, I guess, but there's a lot of different nuances to that. Nope. Okay, we're just going to gloss over that. But then it's like a love relationship. I love you. I love you. Did you know they love each other? They love each other. No. I want you to know they love each other. It's like they'll be really weird at what they'll explain and what they'll leave out. Mm-hmm. Audiences, I think, in general, are a lot smart. Even if they don't get it in the film, they have a friend or somebody they can help them with, or they can, if you string it together in pieces, it works. The multiverse is one of the most interesting experiments in cinema I've ever seen, where you took a movie franchise. Movie franchises have been done, but nothing to the extent of what Marvel did.
Right.
Like 25, 30 films in a continual universe. And then even more than now integrated TV shows and all this stuff. This universe has gotten huge. This has gotten to like all of the works of the writer of It. What's his name?
Stephen King.
Stephen King. All of his works are all in one shared universe. Levels of insanity. But people are able to follow it because you do it slowly.
Right.
You slowly introduce these concepts. You don't shove them down your throat. I think that's why films like Looper, like a lot of time travel films, a lot of interdimensional films struggle a little bit. Because when you try to shove that much stuff in a single film, it gets a little intense. But if you do it slowly over time, people have time to mull over it. They have time to talk with their friends. They have time to research stuff. They have time to think about it. So when the next film comes out and there's another thing added, you can do a little bit of recap, a little bit of new content, and a little bit of exposition. And then when you do that in each film, you can build up upon your own universe. And we have seen concepts that I think were normally taboo for film being celebrated because people can follow it with the way it's introduced. Sony seems to be more focused on being a part of that than making a good film. They want to be part of the, they're like rushing to be part of the multiverse.
Mm.
It's like, just, you don't have to shove the they did in the end of Morbius. Tomb shows up and they're like, hey, we should make a team. It's like, okay, at this point, what you're doing is you're just like, you made this entire movie for that ending scene. People said that about Captain America. I don't know if you remember this, but when the Captain America, the first Avenger came out, Captain America, the first Avenger, oh, so they're just making this film to get the Avengers together.
Mm-hmm.
But then the actual film ended up being really, really good.
Right.
Marvel's like, they're actually doing that. They're making these films just to get these characters on screen. It's like they really want to make the Avengers, but they're not willing to wait to do it right. And they're also not willing to just throw them together, which would be insane and bad, but at least some courage, I guess. They want to make a film for everyone just to get them into a group. That's like the main purpose. They're making these movies for a buddy movie. And the buddy movie might actually be good, but everything leading up to it is garbage.
Right, because they just have this idea and they're like, oh, we have to introduce, people have to understand what Morbius is. People need to understand, how did the Vulture end up in this universe? People need to understand Madam Webb and how she ties into the Spider-Verse. And then, you're right, they're making these films and they're doing it
It's like
half-hearted.
the motivation of the film is to get that character into a team. So they care more about the team. They care more about the ending scene than they do about the movie itself.
Yeah.
I was like, if you cared about the movie as well, it works. They want that scene at the end of Iron Man where I am Iron Man. I'm Nick Fury, and I'm building a team. They want that, but they don't want to make the Iron Man movie to get there. They just want that part.
Yeah.
It's like, you got to make the movie, or your Avengers film is never going to happen if all your other films flop. It's exactly what happened to DC. The Justice League fell apart because they rushed into it, and they didn't give due diligence where it needed to go for those characters to come in. They just kind of started shoving them in together. They made all of the independent movies for all the characters after they did the team up movie.
Right. Which doesn't work.
No, if they'd have done Flash and Aquaman and Wonder Woman first, and then the team up movie, would have worked a little better. And those movies actually, a lot of them were actually kind of fun by themselves. I liked the Aquaman film. I liked Wonder Woman. But they came too late. So it's like Sony looked at what DC did and looked at what Marvel did and picked all the wrong things.
Yeah, they picked
They're
the
like,
wrong things.
let's do what DC did and rush into a team. But we're going to not rush as hard by doing movies like Marvel did, but we're not really going to care about them. We're just going to make them. It's like, what are you doing? We talk about this for a long time, but man, this one was intense because it's like,
well, I mean, we've
Sony is butchering stuff that Marvel's doing well, and it hurts me because I know they can make a good Spider-Man film because Into the Spider-Verse is fantastic.
Yeah.
So I know they can make a good film, they just aren't.
Exactly, and that's the frustrating part. And the other thing is that, yes, we could talk about this for a long time, and we have talked about comic book to film adaptations before, but we, due to when we were recording it, focused on the DCEU, because the DCU was announced and the DCEU came crashing down in the middle of summer when we were recording those episodes. So we kind of entirely forgot, like most people do, I'm assuming, we entirely forgot that Sony even had technically a universe. Like, I forgot Morbius was a thing until literally we had to come up with the schedule for 2024's Curb Stomp. And I saw Madam Webb coming out in February. And then I was just like, oh yeah, Sony makes really bad superhero films. What was that one that was a meme for a while? And it's like, oh yeah, Morbius. Oh, Morbius is technically tied to Venom, and oh, it's a universe. Oh.
Yep.
Yeah, like it's one of those things. It's so bad that we forgot to include it in our first discussion, and we had such a good discussion on it. And this is the kind of films that we're nerds about because, like, I love comic books and how they work out, and I'm also a huge nerd of, film. Yeah. And you're a huge nerd of Marvel as well. Even if you don't like read the specific comics, you're a nerd of the lore.
I go through the lore like crazy. But well, You made a good that comment you made there was a really good one where you're like, you know, Marvel, the connected universe thing and all that stuff, and it's like, oh, it is technically like superhero universes. I used to think that superheroes could only work in either comics or animation because, like, the animated TV shows based off comics were always really good.
Yeah.
The DC animated universe was amazing. The old Fox X-Men and Spiderman shows were really good. Just fun stuff that was just really compelling and great uses of these characters and their lore and their story. What changed that for me, because Sam Raimi, I like Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, but it's campy, you know, it's because it's very much like the comics in real life that looks kind of weird.
Yeah.
The MCU was the first that came out and made it compelling that a comic movie could be more than just a comic movie. Because a lot of their movies aren't comic book movies. They have other genres that happen in a comic book universe. But like Captain America is a war film with a superhero in it. Winter Soldier is a spy thriller with a superhero in it. Ant-Man and Wasp and Ant-Man were heist films with a superhero in it. These films are all interesting because they would shoot them like a different style of film, but it exists in the shared universe. Well, and so they realized it doesn't have superhero film movie doesn't have to be a campy comic to film. It can be its own thing. Well, and after that ruined it for me because like now that I know that they can actually make really fun superhero movies that aren't necessarily superhero movies, I'll never see that the same way again.
Well, and here's another thing that's like double frustrating to Sony's issue. MCU took Spider-Man and literally threw him in 3 completely different movies when he had his solo films. Homecoming is literally a prom movie. It's a prom comedy, coming of age, first love, crush movie. No Way Home is a road trip movie.
Yep.
With a spy element to it. And No Way Home is probably the most traditional Spider-Man comic book movie. It has a 100% only seen in comics plot with the intent of bringing together most of his a lot of his rogues gallery and introducing the multiverse theory for the larger MCU. No Way Home is literally the only comic book Spider-Man film.
Yeah.
And what Sony does is they don't go and they don't make like with Venom. Venom would be interesting as like a journalistic thriller. Like he's being a detective in these things and he's trying to uncover these corruption schemes and stuff like that. And it starts out like that, but it doesn't end like that.
No, that was my problem. It starts out like that. It's really interesting. And then it flips straight to the third act.
Yeah.
It goes straight to fight big bad guy and CGI fight. There was no second act in that movie. There's no point where him and Venom come to a agreement of some kind. He just suddenly decided to listen to him. There's no second act in that film.
Yeah, and then Carnage has an issue too, where it starts out as this like interesting psychological thriller kind of thing, where it's like Cleese Cassidy knows Eddie Brock and he likes messing with Eddie Brock specifically, and when he gets the symbiote, he unlocks these secrets and stuff like that. But it only had 2 acts. It literally was introduce the characters. Wow, this could be really cool, intense, and interesting. And then it's like, CGI by the way, CGI monster fight. Like that's all it was. And then Morbius is literally just CGI monster fight the movie. It has a story. It has a compelling story. But the way that they directed it and the way they shot it,
acts at all. It just is. It's a one continual motion of monotony. That was weird. That was interesting because it was a tonal shift. They're like, hey, let's do something different, and then they did. They just made it bad in a different way.
Yeah. No, and then Madam Webb looks really weird because they're making a girl power film with an interdimensional being that doesn't usually have a human backstory. Like Madam Webb's supposed to be kind of a weird oddity because she's literally an interdimensional being. She's not even a person.
Yeah, she's a mutant, but she's a mutant that like goes into a coma and gets like damaged and ends up her consciousness exists outside of the realm of reality.
Yeah, exactly.
Her body is in a real place in a hospital, but her powers it's all in her mind. Like she controls like multiversal. She literally controls multiversal like strings. Like she can affect reality through her own little like mind powers.
And she specifically can manipulate stuff with Spider-Man's world. Like,
yes,
it would have been. They did Madam Web movie, right? Why didn't they do like Web of Shadows, or what's the one, Shattered Dimensions?
Ooh,
why wouldn't they make a Shattered Dimensions film? Like, if I was introducing Madam Web, that's how I would introduce Madam Web. I would literally have Tom Holland just swinging through, doing his thing in his new suit, and then literally just Shattered Dimensions happens. Oh, by the way, yeah, I'm Madam Web. You've never met me. You know why you haven't ever met me? Because I haven't directly interfered with your timeline. But with Doctor Strange and all of his stuff, it unlocked your string and these two other strings. And guess what? Vulture is in the wrong stream. You have to put him back.
I have feelings about Madam Web because my first introduction to Madam Web was actually the 90s cartoon.
Right.
And
she pulled in a team of Spider-Man.
She came in out of nowhere, and she was like the end throwaway at one episode, and she becomes such an intricate part of Peter Parker's life, and like the way she manipulates him and uses him. She's vague about things because if she's because he gets upset that she's vague and she's not specific about things. But the reason is she is, it affects the timeline. So she's like vague on purpose so that she can help guide him to the right solution rather than pushing him. And it's all like really intricate and well done. And I got really into her character and the comics, this idea that she's like, she was in an accident in a coma, but she can exist inside as an interdimensional being, even though she's like human. It's like, it was really compelling story. And then the comic version of her, the original plus the newer one, and some of the way that they've changed her characters and how it works, her powers work, was compelling to me. And then I see this film and it's like, oh, it's a younger her. That's interesting. They don't really talk about much of her when she was younger. She's always older. She's like in her like 60s, like in the Spider, by the time Spider-Man runs into her. But this is like, oh, this is really interesting. Like, this is way before Spider-Man is born. But then it's like, all these other women who are teenagers will also be Spider-Man people who will be way older than Peter. And I talk like a monotone, and I'm like, I'm already mad because as a Spider-Man fan, this hurts me.
Well, and the other thing,
my other people who I won't mention who also saw that trailer and are big Spider-Man fans was unhappy. Like, how did that trailer make you feel? I have feelings about this trailer. Like, it hurts. A Spider-Man fan gets hurt by these things because you're like, it's an interesting premise that you're gonna botch. I don't know. It's gonna be bad.
It just looks like it's gonna be botched, and you could have done so much so much more. This is the real frustrating part about comic book films. It's just the potential is there. You have such great growth for potential, and then they always inevitably end up squandering it somehow.
Yep.
That's the frustrating part, at least for me, is just seeing the potential loss.
Yep.
Anyway, we've gone over our time immensely, but it's kind of important. We haven't really talked about Sony's films specifically outside of like a couple of mentions here and there. So it's nice to get like a deep dive and air some of our thoughts out and let our feelings towards Madam Web show up. We probably are not going to watch the film in theaters. We're recording this like December, so this will come out February, right before it's supposed to release. So we're probably not going to see it in theaters. I hope. We may.
It depends if more trailers come out and maybe they clean it up more. I'm hoping they learn from Morbius and from audience feedback. But again, I don't know their motivations. It feels an awful lot like they don't want to succeed because I don't feel like they needed audience reaction to know Morbius was a bad film. The people who made it watching this thing put together had to have known this was bad.
Had to have.
You imagine them sitting in the premiere and sitting in the back. You know what it made me think of? Like when you like fudge a major like homework assignment. Like you have a major project in a class that's the whole like half your grade, and you literally last nighted it the night before, and you're sitting in the back of the room and they're reading, like the teacher's reading out your report, and you're like sinking into your chair because you know how uncomfortable and how bad it is. That's how I think they must have been feeling at the premiere. They're sinking into the chair like trying to hide, like, oh no. Oh
no. Here's what I think is happening. Like, I don't think Sony's smart enough for that. I visualize them sitting in the back of the theater like Bialystok and Bloom and the producers. Looking at this film that's just awful and just being like, we're getting away with it. It's going to be a flop and we're going to make millions. Like, they have to be doing it on purpose at this point. Have to be. You have 3 films that are...
Which makes me think that it's either... which the way it's all going makes me think that either they have a back contract with MCU that they have to be bad or something.
Like, they have to do bad so that Disney does better, and then Disney kicks them a little bit extra when the Disney ones do even better because it's not a Sony one.
I don't know.
Maybe.
I don't know. It's just, it's confusing to me. I'd say that, but DC botches it too, so who knows?
Well, yeah. Warner Brothers is just not good at handling
I can talk about
these.
this forever.
Anyway, yeah, like I said, we've gone way over time. Thank you guys so much. If you've made it to the end of this episode, congratulations. You have won the special prize of hearing me ask you to subscribe, please. If you like this video, let us know by leaving us a like and letting us know in the comments. If you are not on YouTube and you're listening to this on Spotify, go ahead, check us out on Facebook. Let us know in one of the comments for one of our posts what you guys thought. Having listened to this, just say, hey, I listened to your guys' podcast on the Sony mishaps, and here are my thoughts. We would love that. We would appreciate that. Feedback is always welcome. And like usual, we will hopefully see you guys in the next video.